So I want to call to order this meeting of the Monroe County Community Justice Response Committee. It is Monday, February the 6th. I will note for the record that we have, did you want to call roll? Courtney? Yeah, let's do that. Let's make it official. Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Judge Stafford. Here. Judge Protein. Here. Here. Martin. April Wilson. Here. Here. Thank you. And I will note for the record that Lee Jones was going to try to join us virtually. So I was chatting with my friend Judge Stafford recently, and I was going to ask her if she would start the meeting off with just a few brief sentences.
Thank you for reminding me to turn on the microphone. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to say how much I appreciated the chance to talk in depth about where we were. I think that talking more is always a good antidote to talking less or talking crosswise. So I really appreciated the opportunity to get together and talk. My message to Commissioner Givens, and one she wanted me to talk about, I think here today, is that I think we have more agreement than we think on where to go. And if we focus on that, I think we can make perhaps some progress. And the areas of agreement that I feel we have, and if you disagree with me, of course, please feel free to say so, because I don't want to be wrong, or rather, if I am wrong, I'd rather know it, are these: that the current jail is not acceptable in terms of its level of constitutional care for inmates, that inmates are members of our society, and that we want to focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment, that we think that the current jail is not able to be renovated in a way that will meet that standard of care with the types of services that the commissioners want to offer and that the sheriff would like to offer. And that if we build a new facility, that the commissioners are in charge of the number of beds, that the council decides whether to approve funding, and that the judges decide whether to send people there. So it's good to have all of us here at the table so that we can have decisions that work together for all of us. I think most people at this table want a jail that is humane, that focuses on rehabilitation, and that is as close to services in the downtown area as is possible. My personal way of looking at that is if an inmate after release can walk to Centerstone or Shalom Center, then I feel better about our location. And obviously, I may be wrong on some of those, but I think that we all have a lot more common ground than we think. And I'm glad to be here at the table trying to get the best result we can for our county and for our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Stafford. TSD, would you please promote Commissioner Jones to panelists so she can join us virtually? There she is. Okay, we're there. Good. Our statement of guiding principles is on the back today of your agenda. So if there are any questions, please let me know. But we're going to switch up today and start with public comment. We'll do that for 20 minutes. People will have a 3-minute limit, as we do for most of our public comment times. And we would like to hear voices that are new that we haven't heard initially. And so we'd like to ask that that priority be honored by the people who are here to speak. We're not trying to shut anybody off. That's not the purpose, but that we wanted to, encourage new folks to step up and be heard. So I don't know if we've got people who are there virtually also. TSD, if you could help us with some stuff on the timing, I appreciate that. So what I see here for people who've signed up to speak is we have Becca Schwartz and Abby. I'm going to mispronounce your name, so please forgive me. If you say it for me, I'd appreciate it. And you can come up to the mic here and speak. This corner one here, and we need to get it turned on. Sorry.
Can you put that one on? Thank you. There you go. Thank you all. Do you want us to sit or stand?
Sit, please. Okay, and I'll remind you, you have 3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm Becca Schwartz.
And I'm Abby and Prong.
We're here with Care Not Cages, but also I'm a citizen of Ellettsville And Abby listened.
Please speak into the mic
Oh.
directly. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
No,
And we both go to the Maurer School of Law. We are here today just to talk about a memo that we recently wrote, a legal memo about federal intervention with county jails that Care Not Cages requested that we look into. Because we understand that maybe there was concern about federal intervention coming in and making the county build a jail that we wouldn't like, or making us build it faster than usual. So we did a little bit of research, and I printed off some of these memos to hand out to each of you if you'd like to take one. Before I say a little bit about it, we just wanted to read a little bit of a preliminary note. So this memo is intended to provide information regarding the process of federal intervention in county jails in light of stated CJRC concerns about federal intervention in the Monroe County Jail. We believe that the best option in addressing the concerns and considerations surrounding the jail should revolve around investing in safe housing for everyone, decreasing the number of individuals incarcerated, and refusing to criminalize behaviors centered around human survival. Thus, we believe that this information can help in contextualizing the concerns surrounding federal intervention in Monroe County, but not the larger problem of how to address the issue with the jail and the larger societal picture and impact. So we just wanted to preface it by saying we're responding to the concerns, but we would rather there be less jail and definitely no new jail. But basically our findings, to put it very simply, are that, as you all probably know, there is the ongoing settlement that's being overseen by the federal court from the ACLU suit. And so there is already a little bit of federal intervention. And the only way, or the way to keep that at bay, is to make sure that we're following the agreement to the settlement, which we have been doing. The reason the federal court is still overseeing it is because we haven't made a permanent solution. But that permanent solution does not have to be building a new jail, and building a new jail is not in the settlement agreement. Also, if the DOJ were to get involved, which I know was a concern, under the Prison Reform Litigation Act, the federal government can never force a county to build a jail. So they can settle and agree to build a new jail, which counties often do, but you don't have to. So Monroe County could never be forced into building a new jail by the federal government. Did I miss anything?
No.
Okay. Do y'all have any questions about it so far? I don't know if that is a thing, but
One more minute if we need to jump or.
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think that's all
Okay.
good.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Becca. Thank you, Abby. And TSD, if you can, would you put the clock on the screen also just to help us? Is there anyone virtually who wanted to speak? We were going to just alternate. Not seeing anybody with a hand up. Next would be Lynn Coyne. Mr. Coyne. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Lynn Coyne. I'm a longtime resident of the county and a taxpayer. I watched the CATS TV recording of the meeting of this committee on January 9th with dismay. Given the serious and important work of this committee, I was stunned by the petty political bickering and infighting of the committee members. Such behavior was far below the standard what I and taxpayers of this county deserve. The same was true of the meeting held on the 23rd, except for the presentation by the sheriff on the condition of the jail. After watching your meetings, it seems to me that this committee is more concerned with posturing and politics than substantive, serious deliberation. It is disappointing. To be clear, the county is responsible for building a new jail. Whether or not a judge can order you to do that, you are likely to end up in litigation if you keep going the way you're going, and that will increase the cost to the county and everybody else, and largely may make the input of this committee, the county, and the city irrelevant. Finding a site for the new jail is the beginning. There will be a long planning and design process and ample and many opportunities for input. As the deputy sheriff said on the 23rd, if you start today, you are 5 years from opening a new jail. Our county needs to move forward now. The city is committed to justice reform, and I would hope that commitment would not waver whether it has membership on this committee or not. If the city believes that it is essential that this new jail be located within the city's limits, then I believe it has an obligation to the community to tell everyone where the sites for the new jail are, why they are good sites, and how the city will proceed to rezone them to make them available to the county as soon as possible. I would ask that everyone stop wasting time on non-productive bickering and start doing substantive work. Please stop the political maneuvering and deal openly, collaboratively, and in good faith with the issues at hand, finding a site, building a new jail, and justice reform. In other words, the guiding principles of this committee. I believe the taxpayers you represent and who pay your salaries deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coyne. Next up on the list would be the Deputy Mayor, Don Griffin Jr., and we're again taking this by thank you, Deputy Mayor. And again, we're taking this by who has spoken most recently. So.
Is this the right one?
Yes, thank you.
Former deputy mayor. I'm Don Griffin. Let me just get to okay, we're on. Okay, there we go. A new jail for Monroe County is several years away, which is why we absolutely cannot wait to address issues within our current jail, as well as community issues that result in people going into the jail. Planning for a new future local jail should not hold up investing in the daily lives of people currently in the jail, as well as public health and restorative justice now. The swift action that Sheriff Marte is taking right now to address physical jail conditions is something I applaud and recognize as long overdue. This needs to be complemented by city, county, and community leader cooperation in addressing mental health and substance use disorder services, both for those incarcerated and those we want to help avoid incarceration. This is also urgent and needs to be addressed with comparable promptness. Every month, about 300 people are booked into Monroe County Jail, and for many of these folks, this is not the first time. Intervening in ways that keeps people from entering or re-entering the jail supports community justice in multiple ways. First, nobody should be stuck in a cycle of incarceration. Second, numbers do matter. The Monroe County Jail already tries to comply with an ACLU cap on inmates. Concerns about conditions are not new. By addressing the issues that put people in the jail, we can also address the numbers of people in that jail and better improve jail conditions. All of this needs to happen long before a new jail is built. It needs to start right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Carol Wilson. Yes.
I'm going to speed read. Okay. My name is Carol Wilson, and I'm a resident of Monroe County, and I'm the proverbial concerned citizen, especially when governmental actions affect me. This is just such an issue. I also try to keep up to date with current events and try to balance the opinions I read. George Will, a man I seldom agree with, wrote an opinion column in the Saturday edition of the Washington Post. that opened with the statement, "What aspects of today's behavior will cause posterity to look down on us when they look back at us? Which of our practices will cause future Americans to exclaim, as many of today's Americans do, regarding their predecessors, how could they be so benighted?" Of course, he was writing about Rikers Island, New York City's jail complex, which a lot of people think of as the world's largest penal colony, and it's slated to be closed by 2026. Certainly in terms of scale, the current Monroe County Jail has not yet sunk to that level. But as the sheriff's office presentation at the last meeting clearly demonstrated, Monroe County has our own realm of benighted practices. Our jail situation is a can that has been kicked down the road far too long. I don't need the sights and smells and sounds that they referred to last time. I don't need to visit the jail. I know many of you have, and I believe the reports I have heard. Ensuring humane conditions should be the baseline for further action for now and for the future. Mr. Will's concluding paragraph also I agree with. And I'm quoting, "Most inmates will someday return to the communities from which they were extracted. The communities might have been improved by the extractions, but most of these ex-prisoners will not have been improved by incarceration. Do not, however, assume that jails and prisons in your city or state are not today making tomorrow worse." The County Commission wrote a lovely statement in December of 2022. It concluded, "It's important to note that while renovation of the current facility has been deemed cost prohibitive, inefficient, and irresponsible to inmate, staff, and visitor, Monroe County officials have taken and will continue to take reasonable and necessary steps to remediate identified deficiencies that can be addressed at this time." I hope that you and the County Council will continue to implement that declaration. Thank you.
Thank you. Titha Goodman?
Good evening, Kaisa Goodman, Public Engagement Director for the City of Bloomington. I'll keep my remarks brief tonight since I believe the main points have been already covered in previous meetings and by previous speakers. First, I want to reiterate that we must keep our focus on public health, both in the immediate sense for folks who are currently incarcerated, and also as we plan for the future of justice and justice reform in our community. It is also critical to effective justice reform that any new jail be located close to downtown Bloomington for reasons including visibility and integration in our community, access to transportation, access to resources and services, economic impact, and more. This committee must not wait until a location and specs for a new jail have been decided on to work with community partners and stakeholders, including social service providers, the city, and others. I do want to take this time to thank the members of this committee who have spoken out with their deep and valid concerns shared by myself and the city administration and so many others about this process. Who is involved? What is being prioritized? And whether we are really centering holistic community justice reform. It is not easy, but it is right. And who is standing up for human rights is noticed. Finally, I want to invite the members of this committee and of the public to the State of Public Safety presentation this Thursday. This annual presentation by the Bloomington Police Department, Fire Department, and Community and Family Resources Department provides an update to the community on the state of public safety in Bloomington and the city's continuous efforts to improve it. It will be held this Thursday at 12:30 p.m. in City Council chambers at City Hall, which is 401 North Morton Street, and will also be available on CATS. I'm happy to provide any further information about that to anyone who is interested. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Debbie Fish is next on the list.
Hi,
Hello.
I'll be very quick. And I haven't spoken for like 3 weeks. I'm here, but I didn't talk. I live in the county. I just mostly have one question. I would like to know the status of the contracts with the Center for Collaborative Systems change, because I just feel what they have to offer as far as facilitation of pulling together that dashboard that we must have before you can decide what's needed and how to come up with a new thing. And I understand there's contracts, but like an update on when that might happen, what's going to, become of all that. And the other thing is a real study of the cost to renovate, because all I've heard are some guesses. And I would feel more comfortable really knowing we needed a new one if I could see the real cost. Thank you.
I can address the question about the IU contract, and I'm going to rely on my colleagues from the judicial bench to complete the answer if you have it. But we know that we're waiting on 2 signatures. Just one now. Okay, never mind. I don't need your help. We're good. The contract was approved by the Board of Commissioners already. It has been signed by the presiding judge. We are waiting on the signature from the sheriff. And once that signature's in place, things will move forward.
And we're anxious to move forward also, for sure. Thank you. We have a little bit more time. I understand there's someone else that wishes to speak.
There's an attendee online too that wants
Okay,
to.
if there's an
has a raised
attendee
hand.
online, let's switch to online since they've been waiting already. Please state your name and whether or not you're a resident of Monroe County. And you have
Renee Miller. I'm a resident of Monroe County. Incarceration causes depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, and PTSD. So when we incarcerate 300 people a month, we're causing that harm. So I think it's important that we start focusing on the real definition of justice, particularly because this committee is now coined Justice Response Committee. The definition of justice is peace and genuine respect for people. And we've seen very little of that. As someone with lived experience, I would like to say, when I was in the system in Monroe County years ago, there wasn't much peace and genuine respect for people, and I'm not seeing it now. It is 100% hard to believe that the commissioners who did see the jail didn't know the condition of the jail. If every window was filled with the debris, that couldn't have been hidden. It had to have been seen. So when I hear statements like, oh, we didn't know, I find that hard to believe. I'm glad that the new sheriff has brought that to the public's attention. So now we can have a true outcry for movement in the proper direction. And I want to echo what my friend Don Griffin had to say. I just want to echo his comments also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. And now there was one other person, I believe, in the audience who wished to speak. Not sure who that was. Okay, well, we're about at time anyway, so let's move on. We have a presentation from our wonderful health department on an extensive survey that they conducted. And so I wish to turn this over at this point to our three people from the health department.
Commissioner Gittens, I just have a quick question. I know that we're at time, and I know the health department is at 5, so we just have a few minutes left. I'm just out of curiosity, because we all see the agenda with public comment. I'm just, as a clarification, I'd like to figure out if this is how public comment will go going forward, or is this going to be changed again for another meeting in terms of, because usually public comment is at the end of the meeting. But I'm just curious to know if this is how this is supposed to be going forward.
It's something that I wanted to try. And so today feels like it's gone fairly well. So going forward, I'd like to continue with this. And if there are major displeasure with it, please let me know and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, no displeasure or anything right now. I just had a quick question. And then my other quick question
And in the
is,
commissioners meeting, we take public comment at the beginning also. So
duly noted, because I watch those meetings too. Yeah. So the other thing is, I got here a little bit late, so my apologies. Folks signing up ahead of time, like when they come in, do they know that they're supposed to be able to sign up ahead of time?
this is brand new. And so we're asking people who want to make public comment to sign in so that we can actually give priorities to those who haven't spoken. And our staff is keeping track on a spreadsheet of when people have spoken so that, again, we can give priority to new voices and new ideas. We're not trying to shut anybody off with this.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm just asking, like, as people were coming.
We'll try to make that clear as well. That's a very good point.
No, I guess I'm still not being, it's still not clear to me. When people were walking in, were they able to do that? Like sign in? Okay,
Yes.
that's all I was trying to figure out.
Other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
And I just have a quick follow-up. Talking about moving forward, there was a couple suggestions I had for our next agenda to help us move forward. I was wondering, and I know I've emailed about it, whether or not we could set on our next agenda a discussion of determining what components of the justice system will be key based on the recommendation in our advisory capacity for the jail, which I think would help get a sense of land size as we're moving forward. To determine how much land we need and what sites are available. It just seems like an important bit of information that'll help us move forward. I was wondering if we can include that on next agenda.
Well, part of it will depend on what happens with our timing today. The commissioners would like to share with people what our vision is for things also. We're still trying to see if Mr. Falk can join us next time. We haven't settled that. And so it's going to partly depend upon what else happens both today and other people outside of that. So it's duly noted, but I don't have complete control over the outside folks either. So,
and
yeah,
sorry. And there's one last thing I wanted to add. It seems like from our last meeting, the sheriff presented a presentation that shared with us about the conditions in the jail. I heard about the tireless work that he and his team are doing to try to address that. But the end of that was also that he felt like he could do more if he had support. And so just as a committee and a community, I was wondering in the future if we could also reach out to the sheriff to see if we could have space on the agenda for him to share some of those things that maybe we could all better understand to see what we can do to be supportive to make sure we have humane conditions in the jail.
Well, I will say that Counselor Crosley and Counselor Munson and I have met with the sheriff. Well, I can tell you that some of the things that he asked about have already been remediated, and we are trying to move forward on the things that he indicated needed to be corrected. So we are working with him already on things. We didn't just sit on our hands. And at last Wednesday's Board of Commissioners meeting, Richard Kreider, who manages our buildings and fleet, gave a report also during the work session on what had already been taken care of and what projections were for what it would cost to take care of some of these things. So yes, we are paying attention to what he had to say, and we are trying to work with him. So
I'm sorry.
the other thing I could say is that it's up to the sheriff whom he chooses to work with. So.
I agree. And I personally went over to see it on Thursday, and had a chance to walk through it. So as a sheriff liaison, on the council as well, there are major improvements that I've seen from the past tour that I took last year versus what we saw, a few weeks ago. And what I saw on Thursday is vast improvements. Obviously, it's still work in progress. But they really are trying. So, yeah.
And we are trying to work with them. But now I'd like to turn this over to the health department. They've been
I'm so
very.
sorry, I had one extra question based on Ms. Wilson's question. It would be of great help to those of us who are looking for land, as was requested 2 meetings ago, if we could get information on the square footage of the current office spaces held by each of the different entities that we are considering for co-location. I don't know how to look that up on my own. I assume at some point the commissioners or council have access to that information. If that could be shared in a spreadsheet or table or however is convenient to do that, that would help those of us who are trying to do some guesstimates and who spend our Sunday afternoons looking at GIS to look for lots of land. So thank you.
Well, I'll point out too that some of the things don't exist at this point. So some of that's going to be a guess if we were to do it. So I want to turn this over to the health department now. I'm sorry for the delay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for allowing us to present our survey findings. As a reminder, the mission of the Monroe County Health Department is to protect, promote, and improve the health of all people in Monroe County. This includes individuals who use substances, struggle with mental health, and those who intersect with the criminal justice system. But the Monroe County Health Department offers some health services in-house or in an outreach setting. We also have a unique role as a collaborator across sectors with many formal and informal partnerships with community service providers in Monroe County. In reaching out to both staff and community collaborators, we understood that some of the questions might not be applicable depending on the services each provided. We attempted to focus our questions in a programmatic manner, identifying strengths and barriers in the intercept model with an opportunity to clarify and a long form answer for major themes within each intercept. We are incredibly grateful for the service providers who took the time to provide feedback, those who forwarded on, and those who asked questions about the survey, even during their busy work weeks. So the sampling method that we used was a convenience sample. Responses were collected between January 13th and January 31st. A survey link was sent via email. A Google form with permission to print and return to the health department or call for assistance was also provided. Email lists included participants in the Community Health Improvement Plan, Community Voices for Health, colleagues in street outreach, individual colleagues from current and previous case management work, and other public health partners. These were not name linked and no questions were required for submission. Survey respondents were asked to verify that they or their agency had worked with individuals who have been incarcerated in an attempt to verify the respondent as a person with relevant experience for this survey. There were some limitations to the survey. This included a short time frame to gather the responses. There was no incentive offered or available to those who participated in the survey. Email application for many emails did go to a spam or junk email inbox and required individual follow-up. There was limited staff time to be able to individually reach out to potential respondents. And a Google is not always an accessible format for all agency systems. The Monroe County Health Department staff do not have a personal or professional relationship with every person providing services to individuals who have been incarcerated or who provide community supports to reduce likelihood of incarceration or recidivism. We at the Health Department are not experts in the sequential intercept model, but we did attempt to frame the questions in the survey around the intercepts, as this was a framework utilized in the strengths and gaps analysis by Eve Hill. From our understanding, the work of Monroe County Health Department and the work of our partners primarily falls in intercept 0, 1, and 4, with some interaction with the other intercepts. An overview of the survey topics include community services, law enforcement services in Monroe County Jail, exit planning and reentry care, and additional comments. And I'm going to turn it now over to Kathy.
Okay, the key recommendations that we drew from the survey are that we need more connections, collaboration, and communication. Communication among providers and the jail staff is extremely important, both before people enter jail and on reentry planning. We need to enhance and increase diversion options for the community, which includes knowing more about 988. A lot of people didn't know how to connect with 988, and we need a lot more awareness of STRIDE. People aren't familiar with the options or what happens when people go into STRIDE, and they don't know that other people can refer to STRIDE or that they themselves can refer people to STRIDE. We need to address policy systems. Included in this is a barrier for both providers and for Monroe County. So we need to find a way to pay for additional treatment in jail. With people currently in jail, can't use their insurance. And so we need to come up with a more way to fund that. More treatment options are needed in jail. Again, I said providers do have a barrier in that they can't bill insurance. So right now, a lot of them are relying on grants. So we need to find a way around that. We also wanted to note that many of these identified barriers were also largely reflective of the report that Eve Hill did in 2021 in her criminal justice assessment and gaps analysis. Just a few examples of this. In a report, Ms. Hill states that the jail is never going to be an effective mental health treatment provider and should not be relied on as such. However, mental health beds, along with substantial treatment and programming, should be available for every inmate with a serious mental illness. The jail has an important place and role to play in getting inmates with these illnesses stabilized, connected to community treatment, and able to avoid recidivism. It cannot do so if people with a mental illness or substance use disorder face barriers to participation. In addition, inmates foregoing treatment because of financial concerns likely increases crises for jail, responding to a greater security needs. She also makes the case for reentry planning. Recognizing that virtually every inmate will leave the jail and reenter the community, the Council of State Governments Justice Center recommends that transition planning begin at the same time as treatment planning for these individuals with mental health and substance use disorders. And that's just what happens in the mental community. Monroe County Community Corrections should include reentry planning, case management, and reentry programming in its treatment plans for inmates with mental health illness and substance use disorder, and engage community service providers in both in-jail treatment and transition planning. Warm handoffs to and coordination with treatment and services providers upon reentry are essential to avoid gaps in care. Monroe County should invest in case management at the jail to work with jail and community treatment providers, with supervision providers, and with inmates preparing for reentry to assess each individual's needs, to identify appropriate treatment and service providers, to introduce individuals to those treatment providers and establish eligibility and other requirements for services upon reentry, and to share jail assessment and treatment information with the community providers to ensure a smooth transition to services. Okay, These are the community partner organizations that completed the survey, and we had quite a few different organizations, with the majority being from social service agencies and those connected with mental and/or physical health. We had 2 responses whose submissions contained only an organization name with no feedback, so their submissions were not included on subsequent questions. All of the organizations going forward all said that they had worked either themselves or the agency with at least one person who had been personally impacted by the criminal justice system. Okay. This would be under community services, and that's up to and including Intercept 0. Okay, this question is, what services do you or your agency provide related to general health care in the community? As the survey was sent to a wide variety of service providers, we wanted to provide context for what services were offered. In addition to the 20 options given, including none of the above, we gave the option for other, which was utilized by 7 respondents. Okay, I went too fast, sorry. The top 5 services reported by the providers were referrals to healthcare providers, different types of testing, including Hep C testing, HIV testing, and STD testing, STD treatment, and primary care in an office setting. Okay, what services do you or your agency provide that's related to substance use or mental health in the community? Respondents were able to pick from multiple answers. In addition to the 17 options given, including none of the above, 3 additional respondents picked the answer for other. So the top 5 services related to substance use and mental health were non-medical case management, life skills education, counseling, and outpatient substance use, mental health services, and psychiatric medical care related to mental health. When providers were asked who that they contact first when a client or patient comes to them with a mental health or substance use related crisis, they were able to select from 13 answers. So they were able to select multiple answers. 4 responses answered to the other category with an individualized note. And this person selected that they didn't like to call 911 because one of the medical providers in the community checks warrants upon arrival. But the top 4 respondents were making safety plans with clients themselves, connecting to other staff within their agency, connecting with IU Health Hospital, including the ED, and connecting with Meadows Hospital. Okay, the question was asked as a Likert scale, with 1 being, I've never heard of 988, and 5 being, I'm familiar with and have called 988 on behalf or with my clients. The majority of the respondents indicated having at least some knowledge of the 988 mental health hotline, with the majority being right in the middle.
All right, and I will be taking over the majority of these massive numbers of slides. So my name is Melanie. I'm the Senior Community Health Specialist at the Monroe County Health Department. And I promise I'm not going to run through all of these slides and read through them. So please bear with me. I'll try and run through them quickly because I know that we're management of time. So 75.8% of our respondents said that there had been a disruption in their ability to provide any health service to clients becoming incarcerated. Only 15% did not, and then the rest did not know. And so in addition to this packet with the PDF, we also have a separate packet with just the survey responses that's also available online. And I have the pages indicated on each of these slides as well, just for reference for anybody that's watching at home. So the question of, if yes, please briefly describe the nature of this disruption and any health outcomes for the client or patient. The major themes here were medication being disrupted, case management being disrupted, a general destabilization of incarcerated folks across all facets of wellness. And I will scroll through these, but you can again read them on pages 4 and 5 of our survey responses and questions PDF. We had a lot of really in-depth responses.
So 45.5% of our respondents said their agency was able to continue services either by their agency providing them or the jail providing comparable services while the client was incarcerated. 48.5% said no, and the remainder said that they did not know. And so a clarifying question, again, to briefly describe how you were able to maintain those services and the continuity of care and how that contributed to the well-being of your client. The two major themes that came out were allowing community providers into the jail for paperwork and case management services, also the ability to provide testing and medication in jail. All of these long-form responses are on page 6 of your survey responses and questions packet. Again, we had a lot of really exciting information in here. 35.5% said that a client had or a patient had ever missed an appointment. Gosh, I can't do this. That had resulted in probationary terms for that client. And then 30.5% said no, that their client or patient had, let's see, it's very well. If a client or patient has ever missed an appointment with you or your agency that was required from probation, 11.5% said that that violation did result in incarceration for that client or patient. So if the client or patient was ever incarcerated following missing appointment with you or your agency, what challenges did that client report that contributed to their missed appointment? So we made a shorter version of this graphic. The top respondents said that the client was experiencing a mental health or a physical health crisis, including being in the hospital. That accounted for 70.6% of our respondents, followed by no phone or lost phone, 64.7% of respondents, and then something related to transportation. So a personal vehicle failure, no ticket, no bus ticket, or a lost bus ticket, 52.9% of our 17 responses. And this is in detail on page 7 of the survey responses and question sheet. So what, if anything, could be done to improve the continuity of healthcare for persons incarcerated in Monroe County Jail? All 33 respondents did respond here. I do want to note that this one also had the option to select other. So we had OB services, one person saying no new jail, access to regular visits, medical care free of charge, and also if individuals who are incarcerated had access to the phone to call treatment centers during regular business hours, noting that often they've heard from clients that they're only able to use the phones at inconvenient times, such as 3 to 5 a.m. But the top 3 responses here of what, if anything, could be done were continued medication, having a psychiatric or medical eval during entry, and the inmate's ability to maintain insurance while incarcerated. And these are also seen on page 7. Right. So thinking about Stride Center and diversion services, 37.5% of our 32 respondents here said that yes, they had made referrals to the Stride Center. 40.6 said no, and then the 21.9 remaining said that they were not sure. In terms of if they or their agency had ever received referrals to provide health services, the majority said no in the Stride Center. That is 11 or 35.5% said they don't know. And then 29% or 9 respondents said yes to provide services after the client leaves the Stride Center, and only 2, accounting for 6.5, said that they had provided services while the client is in the Stride Center itself. So talking about barriers regarding referrals to the agency or from your agency to the Stride Center, as Kathy alluded to, the top response was I or my colleagues are unaware of the outcomes, either positive or negative, for clients who've used Stride services, followed by my colleagues don't know how to make a referral to the Stride Center, followed by the client or patient does not trust Stride, and followed by I or my colleagues are not familiar with the criteria or admission or for admission to Stride. This also had the option to write your own response. A couple of things that I'll highlight because these all kind of are reflected in those previous ones. I think that the fact that only BPD and IU Health ED could refer them at first really did them a disservice. There was a lot of talk about it being such a great resource, and then hardly anyone could refer to them. Let's see. The Stride Center has incredible potential that I fear it will never reach if it continues to be or appears to be so closely aligned with law enforcement entities. My understanding was first contact had to come through the police or an ER referral. So we followed that up to ask folks to share any additional recommendations or ways to support diversion programming. And the major themes here was that jail should remain in town, that transportation is a major barrier across the services that the person is trying to access.
Also an enhancement of the utilization of existing diversion. So STRIDE or other diversion models mentioned were LEAD, law enforcement assisted diversion, CRCs, community-based resource centers, as well as structural barriers. So the ability to provide or for providers to bill insurance while in jail, as well as to limit and eliminate arrests for nonviolent offenses and or non-payment of punitive fees. And these long form responses can be found on page 9 and 10 of our survey responses and questions. We had a lot of really lengthy responses. I will not read them all. Okay, so thinking about Intercept 3 services in the Monroe County Jail. There's a lot going on in this graph. Don't worry, I made a short version. Please rate how necessary any of the following accommodations and supports are to support those with substance use disorder or mental health diagnosis while in jail. So I gave them a number of options. And as you can see, it's a pretty complex graph. So we combined the essential and very important and put those in order. So the top, they're all considered to be fairly important, but in order, we have medically supervised detox, MAT, which is medication assisted treatment, harm reduction support group, individual psychotherapy, exercise, and then on into anger management, group therapy, mindfulness, and then CBT, DBT, AA, NA, and expanded problem solving courts was a much decreased number on that graph. That can be found on page 11. And then to follow up, are there any additional supportive services that were not listed above that are important for inmate mental health and well-being? So the major themes here for this long form answer were consistent access to medications, appointments, service providers, prenatal care, and general life skills programming. This can all be found on page 12 of the survey responses and questions PDF. And thinking about problem solving court, only 40.6% of our respondents said that yes, they had ever been connected to a client as a part of problem solving court. 37.5 said no, and 21.9 said they weren't sure. And only 24.2 of our respondents said that they had ever provided any health services or education to inmates physically within the jail itself. That had 33 responses, and that was all of our respondents that were giving answers to this particular survey. So thinking about ranking the importance of the following trainings for jail staff, again, this was a pretty, there's a lot going on. So we combined in the next slide, all the very important and essential. So the purple and the green lines. So the top trainings that were indicated were mental health, first aid, and de-escalation. So those were 31, I believe. CIT or crisis, crisis training, intervention training, and then addictions, et cetera, is that second tier. And then the third tier down, we see implicit bias and overdose prevention with many fewer respondents indicating SBIRT, which is screening and brief intervention and referral to treatment. So another long form answer, in your opinion, are there any trainings not listed above that would be important for jail staff, including the healthcare staff in the jail? The major themes we saw here were trauma-informed care, cultural awareness or DEI training, things concerning drugs in general, so overdose prevention, drug myths, harm reduction, motivational interviewing, suicide prevention, and then a traumatic brain injury. There is a note in here that respondents made to not expect jail staff to take the place of mental health providers as well. And these long form answers can be seen on page 14 of these survey responses and questions. So looking at factors that contributed to success or barriers of group or one-on-one. So this slide is about the success of programming. So you can see at the very bottom, the majority of our folks that responded to this survey had never provided any programming in the jail itself, but overwhelmingly, the biggest contributor to success was the communication between that agency and the jail staff, with 37% of our 27 respondents. So 10 total folks saying that communications between agency and jail staff being really important. The remainder of them were significantly less. And notably, the biggest barriers were also communication. So between the agency and the jail staff, or communication between the jail staff and the inmate or client. So that was 32.1% agency and staff, 35.7% jail staff and inmate or clients, with again, the majority not having given programming. Just thinking back to the questions that have been asked in a couple of earlier surveys,
if you've ever met with a Monroe County Jail inmate in person, one-on-one, how easy was it to schedule an appointment? The majority of our folks had not scheduled those appointments, but 21.1 said difficult, followed by 13% saying it was somewhat easy, and then a tie at 8.7%, either somewhat difficult or not easy or difficult. If you have ever met with Monroe County Jail inmates in a group setting in the jail, how easy was that to schedule the appointment? Again, majority of our folks responding said that they did not schedule the appointments, but a tie at 14.3% of respondents saying difficult or somewhat difficult. And how often are you delayed in a meeting with an inmate because of either jail staff limitations, limited appointment times, or all meeting rooms are used? The majority of our folks responding to this question said no opinion or do not know, although jail staff limitations had sometimes infrequently at 5 or greater responses. And asking how many meeting rooms would be recommended for a new Monroe County Jail, we had 31 respondents. The majority said not qualified to answer this question, or I'm not sure. 2 respondents saying no new jail, and 9.7% saying 9 to 10 rooms, with all of the remaining fewer respondents. And the in-person meeting rooms in a new Monroe County Jail should be blank. The majority of our folks said, I don't know, no opinion, with 16.1 saying that they should be larger. And 65.6% of our respondents said that the ability to speak with a Monroe County Jail inmate via video would assist them in their job responsibilities. 32 responses out of 33 folks here. However, only 18.8% of our respondents said that they had ever spoken to a Monroe County Jail inmate via video for a meeting to or to provide services. And for folks that had, know that we didn't have a large number of folks that had reported speaking to an inmate via video, but for folks that had, how easy was it to schedule an appointment? 8.7 said difficult, but the majority said they did not schedule an appointment. And for folks that had ever spoken to a Monroe County Jail inmate via video, how often they've been delayed in speaking to them. Again, this is kind of a lot of information going on. So we took out the no opinion and do not know for a simplified graph, which still has a limited number of respondents. Most of them are never. So jail video technology issues, my office's video tech issues, jail staff limitations, limited appointment times, or all meetings are in use. We can see that jail video tech issues sometimes infrequently, but there's a limited number of people that are responding to this particular question. But you can see this one also in detail on page 17 of the survey responses and questions PDF. For services that have never been offered in the jail, has there ever been an attempt to provide those services in the jail that were unsuccessful? So, yes. There's a lot going on here too. My organization's services are paid for with Medicaid, and this insurance is lost. So I guess the top 3 in the second slide, also on page 17. But the number one reason is because services are Medicaid billable. The next highest response was insufficient jail staffing to support that additional programming, and attempts at services were halted by COVID. Those were both at 40% of our 15 responses. So a long form question of please describe any additional clarifications or recommendations regarding ways to improve the provision of services for inmates in a new Monroe County Jail. Our 2 major themes that we pulled out here was that jail would be best in a central downtown location, again, close to services, and a need to increase capacity for to provide services, particularly billable ones inside the jail itself, using external existing service providers. And the long form responses to this are on page 18 of the survey responses and questions. So thinking about exit planning and reentry care for Intercept 4, only 17.2% of our respondents had ever reported collaborating with jail staff in the process of reentry planning or post-incarceration care as a part of the inmate's exit from jail. And that was 29 of our 33 respondents. So if you or your agency has ever collaborated with jail staff in the process of reentry planning, what were the factors that contributed to the success of that planning? So we made a smaller graph, make it easier. On the top 5 responses, top response, bed available in inpatient or substance use health facility the day of release. That was 20% of our 20 respondents, followed by an even tie at 15% or 3 responses for communication between the agency and the jail staff, a bed being available at a sober living home, the client or patient having access to transportation the day of the release, or I or my agency has not been a part of successful reentry planning. And those answers are also all on page 19 of the survey responses and questions. So if you or your agency has ever collaborated with jail staff in the process of reentry planning, please select the same factors that were barriers, if any. And so this one is pretty much just the top options where most of the folks had never participated in reentry planning. But the number one at 21.1% was the process of scheduling an in-person appointment being a barrier, as well as the client or patient not retaining their home or apartment, regardless of whether it was rented or owned. And the other ones were pretty similar, but all of those responses are also in the packet. And 61.5% of our respondents said that they had provided health services to a person that was recently incarcerated that they did not have a part in the reentry planning process. And a long form question of in instances where your staff or services were not included as a part of exit planning, please describe how that contributed to how that absence of collaboration affected the health and well-being of the individual that was incarcerated. There's one major theme here that a lack of collaboration leads to confusion about next steps and a delay in supportive services for the client in the community. And these responses can be found on page 20 of the responses and questions document. There's a smaller slide for this one, I promise. What are the top requests relating to health and wellness that individuals recently released from jail seek from your agency? There are a number of options here, and to make it a little bit easier to see, 28 responses. The top 6 were case management at 64.3% of respondents, followed by a place to rest and outpatient services or outpatient substance use and mental health treatment, both at 57.1% of respondents, and then whether appropriate clothing, counseling, or psychiatry and a mental health provider, all 3 at 14 respondents or 50% of our 28 responses for this question, also on page 21. And then from your observation, what would be helpful in helping persons in Monroe County Jail get access to the resources that they need upon release? So the main takeaway from this one is staff to guide resources or a warm handoff by phone call. That was a whopping 90% of our 30 respondents. The next highest that we gave the option to was transportation or seasonally appropriate clothing. Both of those were at 76.7%, or a resource kiosk at the jail exit. Only 50% of our respondents gave that. There was the option to select other and write something in. So needed appointments should at least be scheduled before relief, if not started, when possible, before released. Better communication and coordination between jail staff and service providers. Ability to obtain cards, not expecting the jail staff to treat problems they aren't qualified to treat. And again, all of these options are in the survey responses. And is there anything else that should be considered to make reentry planning successful in a new Monroe County jail? The 2 major themes here were a need for immediate connection to existing service providers to support the reentry of that person, as well as to sustain existing or help create support systems to reduce recidivism. And those things included housing, employment, childcare, and insurance, and can be found in detail on page 22 of the survey responses and questions document, also in the packet. Additional comments. So in a couple of sentences, what can our community do to reduce recidivism? The major themes here were strengthening connections to and availability of basic needs. So housing, whether it be affordable, sober living, supportive, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, et cetera, as well as supporting case managers. And then diverting first and reducing arrest for nonviolent offenses. There were a lot of responses for this one, pages 23 and 24 that I will scroll through here. And as planning for the new jail continues, is there anything else that we should be aware of relating to healthcare services and the carceral system? So the 3 major themes here were a need for more communication, collaboration to build successful partnerships, and ensuring availability of non-coercive treatment options that are not connected to jail, and allowing for opportunities to hear from people who are or have been incarcerated. And these responses are on page 25 if you're following along in the survey responses and questions document. Okay, hand it over.
Okay, just a quick review, and I think you're going to find a theme here. One of the main things that we found during this, we need more connection, collaboration between the service providers in the jail, both on entry and on reentry to the community. We need to increase opportunities for diversion. We need to address the policies and systems currently in place and see how they can be changed to create better outcomes. And we need more opportunities and options for treatment that can be accessed when community residents are in jail.
One more slide. We did start an individual survey. We did receive less than 5 responses for this survey that was intended for individuals who have been incarcerated. Some of the major limitations here, though, we recognize that we had limited staff time to do in-person interviews with folks during this survey period. And also, reaching out to motivated caseworkers. They've got a lot of things on their plate, working on housing, substance use, mental health things. They have limited time also, especially when the survey is non-incentivized. So some future options. I know we've already mentioned tonight the Centers for Collaborative Systems change. Also, we could extend our MCHD survey, allocate a bit more staff time. Also, if there's incentives or money for incentives to help in this survey process, that would wildly help in reaching the people that we're trying to reach. Okay, thank you. And I just want to really give a huge thanks to Melanie and to Kathy as well for collecting all of this survey data and for preparing this slide presentation for us this evening. Just to kind of wrap up here. So if we are looking at the 3 main takeaways from the findings of this survey, it was that connecting, collaborating, and communicating among service providers is critical, that jail staff and clients can be both a strength or a barrier, and that all are necessary to better support and serve members of the community that are impacted by the criminal justice system.
Wow, that's a lot to digest. Thank you. Are you willing to take questions?
Yes.
Mr. Counselor Iverson.
I just wanted to remind the public that all of the slide pages that were referenced during the presentation are on this body's website, the Community Justice Response Committee's website, as well as you can see all the questions and the long form answers, which due to time constraints, I think we breezed through pretty quickly here. So thank you for providing those ahead of time. I think the committee got those ahead of time as well. So we really benefited from your organization. So I just wanted to say thank you to you for getting all that done.
Are there other questions or comments from all this? Counselor Cross?
So thank you to the health department. I think I have more of a comment and going through as you guys were going through your slides. I pulled up what we had on the website and just kind of going through. But it's definitely a theme, as y'all have pointed out, that number one is it seems to be like location. Seems to be the biggest theme that I take away from all of this, as well as another big thing that I see is collaboration. And folks want to work with each other and have a desire and a strong need to work with each other. So as we sit here and think about the revamping of this committee and whatever is next for us, I think that's definitely something that it would be great for us to start thinking about, is how we can collaborate with these groups and organizations as well. And of course, I know Ms. Wilson had pointed out as well in terms of location, but I think these are things that we have to start thinking of in next steps. And I understand that there is some type of like an urgent push, but I would really recommend, again, for us to really think about these things in terms of the common theme, because we heard this in the judge's presentation, we heard this in the prosecutor and public defender's presentation. We also hear it in the health department community or presentation as well. So there's obviously some type of major theme that we have that's going on where all of our, if I dare say, lanes intersect here. So I think that is really important for us to think about as a committee moving forward.
Thank you, Counselor Crossley. Yes, Judge Stafford.
Thank you. I'm going to borrow Ms. Wilson's microphone with your kind permission. Thank you. First of all, I want to echo the thanks that the other members of the committee have given. I think this is incredible information for us to reflect upon. I'm going to ask you what I often ask litigants in my courtroom, which is, if you had a magic wand, where would you start? So would you, and just for example, would you recommend that we start with social workers as part of the jail staff to do exit planning with inmates before they're released? Would you recommend that we start with what services in the jail? Because services outside of the jail are eligible for Medicaid funding and have a lot more options. But my understanding is, and I'm not an expert in this, is that services within the jail have to be paid for by the county. And so I'm just kind of asking a question of where can we start? Because of course, we don't have to wait for a new jail for these services to start, right? We could just start these.
And I think we have a chance to hit the restart button with the new sheriff and the new commander in the jail. That this is a place that we could be starting. But so your magic wand?
Where would you wave the wand?
Well, I would think that it would be incredibly beneficial to begin starting some of these services, integrating them now with the health department. I think that would only create more positive change, is to figure out how we can collaborate and to begin to create some of the structure for a long-term service that we can provide with the criminal justice system.
So what position would you fund first?
Personally, I would love.
No pressure, no pressure.
Like behavioral health coordinator, social work, along those themes, a navigator, someone to be able to help start the connection process of these services.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's okay. So one of the themes that you found in your survey was that there was a lack of communication, that communication could be better. And I guess my question to you is, did you get a sense from providers that was going unidirectionally into the jail, where they kept trying to communicate with inmates or with jail staff and they weren't getting a response? Or was it bidirectional, where just two ships sailing in the night and no one knew what the other was doing? Or is this just, you had so many responses that you can't tease that out?
I think it might require a little bit more investigation, but there were a couple of the slides, and I'd have to pull them back up, that indicate, oh gosh, there's so many slides. That one of the biggest barriers, was both communication between the jail staff and the inmate, as well as the service provider and the jail staff. So I think it seems like there's just a lot of communication based on what I'm seeing, but there's a lot to dig through. So if anybody would like to do a qualitative analysis, we could spend some more time. I don't have the time.
I guess that could, Kathy, did you say something?
Just some initial things that I think could happen and could help a lot is, one, inmates being assessed when they come into jail, both for mental health issues and physical health issues, and two, case management. Somebody doing case management would help tremendously, both connect the inside of the jail with activities there and the outside providers who can help when they get out.
So many questions.
I believe the Commissioner Thomas had.
Yeah, actually, it's more of a comment, but I do want to extend my thanks. This is really helpful, and it really underlines a lot of things that we've already seen in other facilities and in other communities that we could replicate and or even improve on. But just a point of interest is
the focus here has been on intercept 0 to 5, and we often also talk about intercept 6. And I just want to make a note for those who are following at home or here, that a number of the issues raised in 5 really apply to 6 as well, which is reducing recidivism, preventing recidivism. And so it could be used either way. And so, but I really appreciate that insight and that you covered that whole span. So thank you.
Yes, Ms. Wilson.
When you mentioned case management in the jail, would you mind extrapolating on that a little bit of what, if you've received any information of what that might look like, what specific components would be helpful?
I can't speak to what Kathy was saying, but in thinking about that warm handoff, that actual creating a structure for what is that person going to do as soon as they get out and how do they get there? I think about that, I guess, as a component of case management. If I was going to answer that question, it seems like that came across fairly strongly, even in the questions where we had, these are your options, but you also have the option to select other. Is there a way to, set that person up with a medical appointment, set them up with their insurance provider, make sure that that person has a plan for when they're getting out and is able to effectively make that happen. And it's not just handing them off like, here's a piece of paper, go, good luck. Having somebody to, I guess, kind of handhold them. I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe you have something else to add that you were thinking of that's not that, Kathy.
I think Melanie covered it pretty well. The only other thing I would add is a case manager could keep track of them while they're in jail too, and make sure that they're getting the services that were deemed appropriate for them.
I appreciate that. And I actually have a follow-up question. It looked like from your presentation or the notes we'd received that there was an email list, a couple email lists that you were working with. I was wondering, in kind of an effort forward to work towards better communication, is it possible to get a list of the service providers and a point person? Because I know when we've tried to attempt a warm handoff, sometimes making that connection to the right person has been a challenge. And I was wondering if that's something with some of the resources that you have, you'd be able to help us kind of compile a point person list.
I don't have a current active point person list, but on our community health improvement page plan, part of the website, and I can send you a link to that. We do have a list of our participating agencies in that community health improvement plan, because some of the participants are using their personal emails. We don't have that publicly listed, but we do have a list of the agencies that are participating and an email link also to the contact page of that email, if that is helpful, if that is somewhat useful.
I think we'd also be happy to create such a list for you if you guys want something like that. So
I would be very open to it and would use it. I know that has been one of the challenges that I've had before. So if we can help, that's a good step towards communication, it seems like, for all of us.
Yeah. And maybe there's even an opportunity to create some kind of dashboard that could be used fuller in the community for something like that. That's a very good idea. Are there other questions or comments? You've been very quiet, Mr. Renbeck. Don't want to put you on the spot, but
I mean, I don't have anything to add. I thank you guys for doing this. I know how much work this was on a pretty short timeline. So thanks for reaching out to all these partners. Our office works with them a lot, and we're happy to have their input.
Judge Carothy, anything? Counselor Wiltz? I was overwhelmed reading through this earlier with the individual things that were answered, and some of them were a little bit startling to me about the actual breakdown in the communication that seemed to occur. So I hope that with a new sheriff in town and with a new jail commander that we can start to erase some of those things, and create new lines with everything. But I appreciate the comments here tonight also. Commissioner.
Maybe you have one.
Yes, sure.
As far as communication, and maybe Ms. Renbeck can speak to this more than I can, but when I was a public defender, the jail wouldn't always answer the phone when you called to set up an appointment. And also there are only 2 rooms, really 3 if you count the law library, where you can meet with service provider, your attorney. So I think right now with the jail staffing as it is, it's probably not gotten any better. And when you saw the conditions of the jail, you can kind of understand why it might be hard to retain people, but I think that's probably one of the issues, so.
But we do have the opportunity for some of the uses of tablets and telehealth and those kinds of things now too, that we've become much more proficient, I hope, at using since COVID.
Before we end today, I wonder if we could make sure that we have at least a list of potential agenda items. I understand you can't commit to those right now because we don't know whether Mr. Falk will be available and et cetera, and I'm not asking for that. But I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to say the one or two things that are present as things that need to come next. I think our committee has validly faced some criticism for not moving forward. I think we're all here on the same page wanting to move forward, but in a way that because I'm a lawyer, I have to say involves due process, meaning everyone has an opportunity for input and et cetera. I know for me, I would like that square footage number. I don't know if that's possible, but that would greatly help me look at things. And I'm a frustrated architect, so I would like to, rough up some things more than I have. I know Ms. Wilson has talked about transportation, and I echo her concerns. I don't know if the jail is able to do any cost estimates on what it would cost to move inmates back and forth to court. If the court and jail were not co-located for a period of time, as that would help us, I think, plan whether we need to build all at once or not. And obviously, when I say we, I mean the people who are statutorily charged with making those decisions. We're just advisory. I get that. I'm not in any way trying to overstep that. But I think that the more we have those data, the better this committee can make recommendations, and then you all can decide whether to take them.
And to that point, I have taken down notes for those agenda items. And I think, I'll try to continue to be as transparent as possible in terms of how we're moving forward with what data we can collect from various departments in county government.
We do want to have also a presentation from more than just the commissioners, but also people who've gone on to see some of the other facilities. That includes Vigo County, Hamilton County, Franklin County in Ohio, Kenton County in Kentucky, and 3 facilities in Arizona. So we do want to be talking about what other people are doing, not only with their facilities, but the kinds of treatments and programs that they have built into that. Those are pretty critical, and they address some of the things that we've even heard about tonight, like a release program, where it's more than a warm handoff. It's a hot handoff, basically. I mean, it's very thorough with the kinds of things that are going on in other locations. So that's one of the things we do want to have Ken Falk come and talk. It's still not clear to me about having the design group come and talk if and when that'll happen also, because that'll get to some of these questions that Judge Stafford has asked also about how much space do we really need. And I think we need to point out that if we buy more space than we need, and if we end up not co-locating things, which could happen in the future, we don't know what the funding sources for certain things are going to be. But it is possible to break off some of those sections of land if we overbuy and sell those, to use that to purchase other kinds of facilities, or to do some of the other things that we feel like we need to do. Commissioner Thomas, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I don't think today's a good day to do that.
Okay.
I think one of the things that what we have been talking about internally is getting us on a roadmap that is very specific with tasks and goals, and but we are kind of in a holding pattern waiting for Mr. Falk to be available, either in person, which is ideal, but if not in person, at least via Zoom, to talk about the current facility. And I think one of the things that's difficult for us is that we haven't said much yet as commissioners about what our vision is, and so people have been sort of inserting what they think it is and going off of that. And I really appreciate hearing a lot from the community, and we've heard a lot of some ideas. We've had some great questions posed. And that's really helpful and informative for us as well. But a lot of the time as well, we've been hearing commentary that's actually not factual. And that just tells me that we're not communicating yet clearly enough. So I think we do need to have that opportunity at some point soon, and I hope that we have that. I just don't think today's the day for that because we're short on time.
We are short on time. We've got 4 minutes left, I think. I do also want us to start to think about breaking into those subgroups and what that'll look like. We're going to need a subgroup to actually look at the facility. We need a subgroup to talk about judicial process. It was recently brought to us that maybe we need a subgroup to start to talk about some of the treatment, which coincides with what we've heard today here, and who would be on, especially that treatment group, because that's something brand new that we'd want to do. And those subgroups, we hope will extend beyond just the group that we have sitting around the table tonight to include other people, because they certainly have a lot to add to our discussion. Yes,
I did. So if I hear the commissioners and Commissioner Thomas, we're waiting on Kim Falk to do some things, I guess, as an advisory committee, just out of curiosity, then what can we do as we wait in the meantime? Because it seems like time is of the essence.
Right.
But then we're still waiting. So it's also like, then what is really the role of our advisory committee? What can we be doing since we can't wait, since it seems to be the theme, keyword tonight is theme, is to try to collaborate and to do a lot of these things now. How can we start implementing these things as we sit here and wait on other people to be ready? Because it seems to be we can do these things while we are waiting.
Absolutely. We do need to hear from him because people continue to reference, can we renovate the current jail? Why can't we stay downtown? And those are mutually exclusive and sometimes the same question. And we do need to hear from him. And I'm just hopeful that we can hear from him in the next meeting or two. I think it would be really useful for us as individuals who went to these different communities and saw different facilities or are aware of other facilities or other processes, to just take the time to roundtable and share what we thought we really liked in these facilities, what we didn't like in these facilities, and we don't have to name the facility, but and we still haven't given our report on Arizona. So that would be useful, I think, for folks to hear, because we saw some really incredible things there that we all
really
agreed, would be wonderful if we can find a way to fund it. And so I do think having that roadmap, planning to have a roundtable where we think about what we've seen wherever it has been that we like and don't like, and being able to share that in one place at one time, I think would be really useful for all of us to hear. It's not just what any one person thinks, but what we all think and what we've all seen. And it could be anything from, whether the medical check goes before the scanner, whatever it might be, the case management we saw in the facility at Arizona was really incredible. So I just think that that's what we need to do. And hopefully we can get Mr. Falk here either at the next meeting or the one after it. It's just out of our hands in terms of his schedule, but we're working on it. And certainly it's not saying we stop and wait for him, but it's just something that as a full group, I think it would be useful to have that presentation for Mr. Falk.
Counselor Iverson, would you work with me on putting together a list of who saw different facilities so that we can tap them for that facilities discussion?
Yes, we have that data.
Okay. Yes. This wasn't,
So from what I'm hearing you saying is that it sounds like the commissioners have already made at least some decisions. And maybe at the next meeting, if Ken Falk isn't available, you could share some of those so we could use those as starting points to figure out how we're moving forward, because that's, I'm kind of hearing that, is that some decisions have already been made, and then we can start from there.
rather than decisions, they're more of our goals and our dreams and our understanding of what needs to be happening.
I would be open to hearing them. I think that would maybe help us. I've made some agenda suggestions and it seems like they don't fit into those goals and dreams. And I'm just trying to figure out where they will fit.
Sure.
Because I'm also trying to move us forward. So maybe you could just share that roadmap with us.
We've been working on it. It's rather elaborate for us and going back and forth as well. So yes, we have been working on it, and we've also been working on the presentation on the facilities that we've seen. So we will try to have one of those by the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yes. Unless we have Ken Falk here. So because that we have to wrap him into this. So, but yes, we are working on those.
And if I can, there is a member of the public that is on Zoom that asked if we can confirm the date and the time of our next meeting. I see it here on the agenda, but I just want to make sure, I'm assuming we're going back to where we were originally with the first and third, since it's on, according to the agenda, it says February 20th. Is that, okay.
That's the third.
That is President's Day, but it is not a county holiday.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that might be why that question arose.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. So for those in here, and those that might be watching later and those that are here on chat, our agenda says that next Monday, or next meeting rather, is Monday, February 20th here in the Nat U Hill Room at 4:30 p.m. So plan accordingly.
And I thank everyone for being here. Judge Stafford.
I just wanted to indicate that I don't think too many of us are opposed to meeting more frequently if we need to. We recognize that these problems are urgent. If you want us here every Monday, I'll be here every Monday. I think we need to keep that momentum. I really think tonight's meeting was very productive. I really appreciate that. Happy to be here as much as we can.
I think we have a good plan for momentum when we break into groups. I think that momentum hopefully will accelerate. And that's our goal anyway. So.
And I just add that I'm happy to come every Monday because I know with subcommittees, it's difficult to imagine a subcommittee that wouldn't require a member of the public defender's office, the prosecutor's office. And I have 4 or 5 subcommittees, maybe more burdensome as well on the community when they're trying to participate and receive information. So I'm happy to come as a joint group every Monday during this time as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And thank everyone for being here, both in person and virtually. And thank you especially to our health department. Very nice job. Very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. I should also say that our vision is that when the subcommittees start to meet, that the big group will not meet for a bit to give the subcommittees time to come up with their recommendations.
And I'm happy to talk about, sorry, I thought we were done. I'm happy to talk about subcommittees. I just, I'm a little concerned about the burden on the community and the committee. So if we could talk about that as a committee, I think that'd be wonderful.
Okay.